Welcome, everyone. On behalf of the Roberto C. Goizueta Center for Entrepreneurship and Innovation, I would like to welcome you to our FinTech panel for this evening. This is about the fifth or sixth panel we have run since we launched the center back in January. The center was ongoing for a period of years, but was generously endowed by the Goizueta Foundation, and we're pleased to be able to bring a series of programs to both our students and alums. And one format we're using are these panel discussions. We started them a couple of months ago with a panel discussion on the future of the auto industry, and then quickly moved to tonight's topic, which is of interest, I think, to a lot of folks, which is the future of fintech. As many of you know, Atlanta has emerged as one of the major centers for fintech investment. The fintech space has been growing dramatically and seems quarter to quarter has garnered more and more funding. It is disrupting individual verticals of financial services and pretty clearly presenting challenges to some of the integrated financial service companies in terms of how they partner and engage with them. And so we're pleased for tonight's session to have a panel of experts talk a bit about trends in the industry and elements of note. So we're going to be led through this process by our alum, Gardner Gerard. Gardner is one of the co-founder and managing partner of TTV Capital. I'm going to let him talk about the range of his investments. He's invested in any number of firms. He's on the board on a range of others. And so he's going to do a little quick intro, get our panel off and going, and moderate the session. And we would ask, if you have questions as the session goes along, please post them in the Q&A. So with that, Gardner, welcome, and thank you for doing this.
Yeah, you bet. It was a pleasure to do it. Certainly a subject that I enjoy talking about. Just for background, I'm actually a 99 MBA grad, and started this venture firm right when I graduated. And it was 1999, and I don't know, world was just a little bit crazy around the internet and technology. And somehow or another, a 29-year-old MBA grad, I was able to raise about $40 million, and didn't initially know we were going to invest purely for fintech. We were just looking at things that leverage the internet, and over time, largely because of the concentration of payment companies and fintech skills in Atlanta and Georgia, we ended up by 2001 focusing exclusively on financial technology. And I think we've done over 80 deals now, investments, and was very fortunate to do early investments in both Scott Grimes' company, Cardlytics, as well as Johnson Cook's company, Greenlight. A little smarter on Greenlight. I had to get seasoned. Scott can point it out if he wants. I did miss the original seed round. When they came in, he likes to remind me of that. He already reminded us in our little preamble before we got started, but did not with Johnson. Got in the seed round and have been in every round since. But two of our best companies, and really pleased that they were willing to spend time here with us tonight. The whole Goizueta community is very near and dear to me, so this was like easy. But these guys are working a day job, and we really appreciate you guys making the sacrifice to spend some of your time with us this evening. So I'm going to just kick off by asking Johnson if you just introduce yourself, and then a little bit of your kind of personal background, that kind of thing, and then we might get into the company Greenlight a little bit later, and then we'll let Scott do the same thing.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Gardner. This is fun to do for sure. Nice and informal, I guess, as far as informal Zooms go. But yeah, so Johnson Cook, I actually grew up east of Atlanta, went to Georgia Tech, started my first company as an undergrad, which I advise no one to do ever, is go do it on somebody else's dime. But whatever, it was a good 10 years, learned a lot of lessons the hard and expensive way, but it was a good time. Sold that company right when my good friend David Cummings sold a company called Pardot in Atlanta, and joined up with him and built the Atlanta Tech Village, and got to see the wonders of well-capitalized businesses and startups, and that's kind of what led me to the journey to find Greenlight, and my co-founder Tim, who is an entrepreneur, EIR entrepreneur in residence at Georgia Tech's incubator ATDC. So excited to be here. Thanks, Gardner.
Yeah, thank you. And Scott?
Hey, Gardner, thanks for inviting me. Scott Grimes, co-founder of Cardlytics, and we'll talk a little more about that. I've been all over the place in my career. I began as an engineer designing silicon for military about 1,000 years ago. Spent some time in management consulting, and then was an executive at Capital One, where we saw a lot of trends going on in payments, and that led to the inception of Cardlytics. But one of the things that really strikes me about fintech and the world we're in today is these are technology companies, right? We're using it to enable commerce, but at the core, these are technology businesses with big data and lots of analytics, and that's what kind of excites me about them.
Yeah. And how close are you to getting your Jedi designation? I mean, you look like you're in training.
Well, it's probably worth mentioning.
Designation.
Should we start calling you Obi-Wan Kenobi?
Well, so the two things that are worth mentioning is when the pandemic hit, I was like, where can I go that's going to be disease-free? And I thought being up on the bridge of a Star Destroyer was a great spot. But then the second thing is, people could tell from my picture, there's not a barber in the Star Destroyer. So I've been growing my hair for 2 years now.
I like it.
Yeah.
And I can't really see the audience, but so I don't know who they are, but like, I think that one of the coolest office spaces I've ever been in is Cardlytics and the Pond City Market. And it's every room kind of has a Star Wars theme, and it's really been a big part of the culture. It's a lot of fun. Okay, so maybe Johnson, why don't you just talk a little bit about what Greenlight does, and what you're doing, and then we'll have Scott do the same thing for Cardlytics, and then we'll just get into I don't know, talking about what's taking place on a macro level and the disintermediation that's occurring. And by the way, all the attendees, please, like, I know Rob said this, but post questions in the Q&A. I can ask questions all night, but love to ask your questions if you have them.
Good. So we don't have to predict the future of fintech. That's not that by the title.
At some point, that question will come up. What's the next big thing?
I don't know about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the way we tell the Greenlight story, the Greenlight story. So Tim and I started it really focused on the consumer problem of how parents give their kids money. I have 3 kids. Mine are now, I got to get this right, 15, 13, and 10. Tim has 4 kids. We really did, just having seen and had been advising startups, too many startups were focused on kind of their solution and their invention, and they really wanted to build something. But the most common mistake that we saw was like not understanding the market problem that you were solving. And so it actually, like, we have this huge mission now, and this changed the world. Like, everything that we do is our mission. But to be perfectly honest, like, it didn't start with that. It started with solving a problem of how do parents give their kids money for kids under 18 at home. We validated that problem. 86% of parents use cash. Actually, 7 years into this company, that still is the number. I think it may be 85%, maybe 1 point drop on how parents of under 18 kids are giving their kids money. But when we launched, it took us 2.5 years to get launched. It was a long and painful process, and Gardner would not even take our calls, Scott. Just so you know, we can talk about Gardner's stories, how smart he is on Greenlight. We'll talk about that later.
That's not true.
But
we met painful down there at that restaurant, and I met.
Yeah, that one time in 2 years. But no, it was hard. It was hard. And we thought it would take us $500K and 6 months to get it built and launched. It took $2.5 million and 2.5 years to get the first card in market. And it was a long, painful process. We got launched. The consumers enjoyed it, liked it, said really good things, which are parents, obviously. What we noticed parents were saying when they were sharing it was a very kind of, I won't say viral, but very organic product. Like, parents love to talk about what they're doing with their kids when it works well. And so parents were saying, Greenlight is how I teach my kids about money. Like, it was really funny. They were signing up for this one thing, which was debit card, spend controls, instant phone. Like, those words worked. But then they would say something completely different. This is how I teach my kids about money. And so I think that's where we started to realize, wow, like, they see us as the way to teach their kids about money. How are kids learning about money? Like, how did we learn about personal finance. And, you know, Tim and I got to compare our own backgrounds. Like his dad taught him to invest at a very early age, taught him to save, put money away, taught him about building credit history, all these things. My parents not, like they didn't understand investing themselves. So they weren't going to teach us how to invest because they didn't understand it. And it was like mysterious and scary. So Greenlight is now like, I think just embrace that mission, and it is our North Star. Like we help parents teach their kids about money. We even have this like new version of that, which is like we shine a light on the world of money for parents and kids, which is like just expose these concepts. Kids are really, really smart, and they have a smartphone at 9 years old now. If you can build products that they can use that solve problems for the family and do them in a mission-driven way that's good for their future, the market will embrace you. So we've got this beautiful product that's I think a rare thing. It's both painkiller and vitamin. It's like we need it today because we need a way to safely invest in the stock market or save money or have a debit card, but we're doing it in a way that's good for the future of the family, which is not something that you're searching for. You're not buying that, but we've gotten pretty good traction, I think, because of that combination.
Great, thanks. And Scott, maybe tell us a bit about the kind of light bulb moment and how Cardlytics came to be, and then for those that aren't familiar, I think kind of the, you know, where you are now as a public company and number of employees and growth, and also why you elected to come to Atlanta to do it.
Yep. First of all, I have to point out that I was an early Greenlight customer. My son, who is now 17, that card was how I taught him about money. So I 100% agree, Johnson.
Thank you.
And so my co-founder and I were both executives at Capital One, and we were developing a pretty revolutionary kind of financial product called decoupled debit that basically allowed consumers to use our debit account with any checking account. And what was cool about it is we saw all the consumers' transaction data, and we started studying the transaction data and realized, like, wow, when you see somebody spending, you actually know what's important to them. So the other thing that was going on in banking, and again, this is 14 years ago, is the rapid growth of electronic banking channels. It started off, of course, on the web. Today, it's mobile banking. But customers, especially debit card customers, were going to online banking an average of 28 times per month. So we're like, banks have this incredible data about consumers. They know in many ways what's more important to them than almost anybody else. They have this trusted channel to consumers. While maybe it's not sexy, guess what? It's bot free, fraud free. It's where people go and check their money, so they're paying attention. And we're like, if we could take the banks around the country and treat them as a single place where we're bringing that payment data at scale, and a single place where we could go bring ways for consumers to save money, or marketing in essence, across those digital channels at scale, we could build a really better marketing alternative to things like social media. And so that was a big idea 14 years ago. Johnson, you guys did a lot better than we did. Mine and Lynn's first business plan said we would be profitable with a total of $10 million of funding and 5 million customers. We actually raised more like $1 billion. But we also have 180 million customers, about 90% of all the households in the US today. So, but the concept was unlock the power of payment data, use it to better bring things that interest people to them, and importantly in the back end, use that data to measure the effectiveness of our marketing down to the penny.
Yeah. You know, one of the things when people ask me about fintech, and I want to give it real simple, what I just talk about is, what we've seen in the last, 20, 30 years in this digital age is just an emergence of all these new technologies. And in the beginning of those technologies, the money gets made on, investing in the internet and the workings of the internet, or the workings of cloud computing. But as you go on, the real wealth gets created when those enabling technologies get used by, entrepreneurs that build applications that kind of disrupt or modernize products and services in any industry, whether it's healthcare, manufacturing, retail, financial services. Can you maybe just talk a little bit about in your journeys with the companies, what were the technologies, the enabling technologies that really were different, that allowed you to present the product that you had that you couldn't have done 10 years prior because there just wasn't the tools, whether it was online banking or mobile phones or but and either one of y'all can take that first, and then
Go for it, Scott.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. When we started the company 14 years ago, the cloud was just something pretty in the sky you looked at when you were bored. And to your point, Gardner, some of our hardest technology challenges back in 2008 was being able to serve up hundreds of millions and then billions of advertising impressions with the existing server-based technology. So much of our heavy lifting was really around stretching the limits of technology. I remember when we first brought Bank of America online in 2011, they did not have servers, web servers powerful enough to serve our ads. So we worked with Dell and bought some of the ones used by the military that B of A could go purchase to be able to handle our impression volume. We just acquired a company about 6 months ago, a company named Dosh, which was a smaller version of what we did, but kind of works with neobanks. They built all of their stuff in the cloud. It was dramatically easier for them. So what's kind of interesting to me now is many of our really big challenges back 10 years ago, 12 years ago, would not be our challenges today starting the company. Now, the flip side is we started it when it was a lot harder stretch, but I do think ultimately we won because of our first mover advantage. So maybe it was right to go tackle those things at the time we did. But what's interesting today is how much easier it is to go accomplish things that were really difficult to do for us to do 5 or 6 years ago. Same with AI, right? Using AI or ML 5 or 6 years ago, we had a very small number of people who could do it, and they were big efforts. Today we build models every day that are smarter and smarter with very low effort.
Yeah. Johnson?
Well, yes. So I'll speak to Greenlight first, but my story for the server in the cloud is when we were integrating with our first big bank, we were obviously all in the cloud, and they send all the architects and the IT guys into it. I do say IT intentionally, not software engineers. These are the IT guys, right? The data center guys, to talk about how many transactions per second can we handle? We're like, well, we use auto scaling. So when it hits this, it just goes up and it just keeps going up. They're like, yeah, but where does it stop? We're like, never. It goes up like that. Literally, we spent 30 days going back and forth explaining the cloud to the bank who didn't understand. What do you mean it just keeps going? We're like, no, literally, it just keeps adding and scaling. It's going to be really expensive at some point, by the way. And we now, pay for that because the partners want it. But it's really just awesome enabling technology, which we didn't appreciate maybe until we were, alongside a partner who's all on-prem and kind of definitely limited transactions processing volume. So for us, the technology, I guess, is just really how easy. Nothing is easy, but we were able to unbundle an issuing bank, a processor for issuing a debit card, the loading partners, one loading partner for debit card loads, one loading partner for ACH loads, the KYC, which is know your customer, how do we identify customers, how do we know who they are, to card production, to all these services where it's much different than just a software company where you can just go spin it up on ABS. We needed an AWS for everything that a bank needs. And we were able to do that. And you could do it, by the way, at the time with one partner. There were, companies who would do this all in one. I'm not going to name them. And if we had done that, our gross margins would be single digits now, where we're in high software gross margins today, because we decided to kind of unbundle the stack, if you will, and negotiate each of those deals individually. So that just capability that existed was a big deal. The other part for us was kind of a consumer capability, which was first of all, kids have phones. That's the no-brainer, obvious thing. Second, cashless, society is a real thing. And as adults, we don't use cash anymore. So there was a macro trend around that. And then the third thing is just consumer willingness to sign up for financial products in a mobile phone. If you think about that, 10 years ago, you said, put your social security number and type in your bank credentials here, you probably weren't doing that. But now it's just a normal thing, and consumers are willing to do it. So we've been very lucky to have done this at this time when I think this has been tried a lot of times before. in our world, there's, as investors told us in those early days, there's a lot of dead bodies on this trail. Are you guys sure you want to go try to do this? And I think all those things just at least helped us do this. Maybe we're lucky, if not good.
Johnson, is that what Gardner told you after he wouldn't take your call?
Yeah, he's like, oh man, have you heard of this company called Oink? Oh man, that thing went up and down. Now, he may not have been one of those people, but I heard a lot of people tell me about the ones who had raised money and failed. And there was a lot there. There was, I mean, a lot of things had to change with timing, but also a lot of things had to change with execution. I give my co-founder, Tim, all the credit for the product strategy because he nailed it and he held the line on these details that matter to consumers that a lot of people miss. That if you're a bank executive and you think that you can just go out and build this startup, it's a debit card for kids, it's just another debit card. A debit card for kids is not just another debit card. There is a lot of small details that have to be executed there. So yeah, it's okay for Gardner and anybody else who passed early. But Gardner did come along. I'll give him credit. He's on my board. He's probably on the committee. So
just out of curiosity, Johnson, who's your largest investor shareholder? I'm just curious.
You are Gardner. You are Gardner.
I definitely can take it from Scott because we missed a little bit there, no doubt. But we learned our lesson. I matured. I evolved. That's how you do it.
That's true, Scott. Cardlytics is in the pitch deck for Greenlight. It was like, we missed this one. We're not going to miss this one.
We didn't miss. So just for the record, for everybody listening and everybody's we did invest and we did do well. We just didn't invest as much and as early as we could have, and we would have done a lot better had we. But, okay, so one of the things like I'll say that comes up a lot is like the incumbents are under attack, and when I describe that to people, it's like, look, it's like, Kodak's core competency historically was chemical, and they had this application called film, and then digital came along and they had this application called photos. And, Kodak really didn't evolve into being a digital native organization. And, what banks, when I think about banks, when I think about their traditional core competencies, it's like pictures of the vault or the safe or security or compliance or regulatory. They really aren't software digital organizations, and in many ways don't have that native skill set. So they're reliant in many ways on entrepreneurs and startup companies to kind of present those types of solutions to them so that they can have applications that consumers want or businesses want. Can y'all maybe talk, maybe Scott start here on how Cardlytics was, in some ways the financial crisis and that pressure for overdraft and debit interchange reduction, was a catalyst for how Cardlytics has helped banks kind of modernize and move forward into the digital age. And Johnson, the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, Gardner, to some degree, you gave my answer. The real genesis of our early banks adopting this was prior to 2007. Banks made about 2% of every purchase in every debit card. And then the Durbin Amendment came out, which sort of wiped out that debit interchange. And all of a sudden, debit cards went from being a revenue generator to a cost center for banks. And so a lot of our pitch was to banks that let us bring rewards to your debit card customers. We'll pay you a revenue share, and we'll improve the profitability and the stickiness of that debit card consumer relationship. And for people on the call, it's still true today, about 70% of US consumers use a debit card for the majority of their purchases. Only about 15% use a credit card. And so we are really going after that sweet spot of US consumers. But Gardner, to your point, I think what was interesting in some of the early banks is they knew they were incumbents, and they knew they were at risk from the challengers. But they got that if they could work with startups and entrepreneurial companies, that was the way to get themselves to transform and be becoming more digital. So I do think we work with most of the banks in the country now. I think the more progressive ones know that they're under threat from the neobanks, know that they are running the risk of just becoming a box full of money, unless they become a more and more digital-centric, consumer-centric organization than they've been in the past. And I think the ones who do that best are the ones who don't try to do it on their own, but try to do it like innovative companies like Greenlight.
Great segue.
Go ahead,
You're
John.
welcome.
And so it's a smallish crowd, so I can be a little bit open here to say it sucks to work with banks. When you're building a really
it is recorded.
Okay, then please edit that
There'll be a lot of people watching.
Thanks a lot. No, I will say, and any good bank friend or investor knows this, that compared to a high growth direct to consumer startup, where we control every dial and every needle of the marketing program to the hour, to the minute, we can literally turn up this channel right now tonight at 6:30 and see results in the next 2 hours and then turn it back down. Like, going to a partnership model where we're partnering with banks was a dramatic kind of thing for us. But we thought it was really important because an unnamed top 10 bank, more than one, has told us the average age of their deposit customer is 55 years old. They're not worried about Chime because all those kids signing up for Chime don't have any money and they're 23 years old or whatever. Like, there's some version of this where I've sat on the top floor of some really nice old school banking tower with a bunch of guys in suits saying, we're not worried about them because we have all the customers and we have all the money. That's a direct quote, by the way, from a top 10 bank CEO. The ones who are starting to pay attention to Greenlight are realizing, wait a second, the kids of our customers who are 55 are 12. And when they go to college, it's looking more and more likely they're going to open a Chime account and a Robinhood account. And they're probably actually not going to come here because the only way you can open an account is to come to one of our branches. And by the way, they moved, they don't even live in their hometown. And so they're starting to realize that, like, they have this box of money right now, but all that money eventually gets handed down to the next generation. And where are those customers going to be banking? And if you fast forward that 20 years, it looks a lot different than it looks like now unless something changes. And I get the incumbent position and it's hard and it's regulated and everything else, but there are just these macro trends that cannot be ignored. And so we decided as a company that, like, because the banks do have all the parents, right? We sign up a parent for Greenlight. They do have all the customers and they make natural partners. We're not trying to get the parent to switch their banking relationship. So we do believe that partnering makes natural sense for us, even though it's slow and hard and much different than the fast growing consumer business. So we decided to do it. And we have a slow growing, but very healthy bank partner business. And again, they make great partners for us. You got to deal with the technical challenges and the hurdles and everything else, but we're pretty happy with the two-sided business that we have right now.
All right, attendees, post those questions if you want me to ask them, or I'm just going to keep going. So how about let's shift to just like your, not necessarily from your positions at Cardlytics or Greenlight, but just like, what do you see happening around, in the fintech world in terms of, where the opportunities lie, where their vulnerabilities are? I mean, we talked, Andreessen Horowitz put out a deal about there's $2.3 trillion in assets in, incumbent banks with NPS scores below 50. Some top 10 banks have negative NPS scores, and how are, the Chimes and the Revoluts and the Greenlights and the Robinhood's going after them. Like, what do you guys see as like where do you see all that headed? Where do you see the opportunities? Where do you see the, vulnerabilities for the banks, outside of even your kind of core offerings?
I'll start. Yeah, just like for me, there's been a lot of articles recently around fintech and where the opportunities are, and I agree with this, which is like focusing on deep verticals, like consumer verticals. I think we've seen it. We made the decision we're going to focus on families and continue to add financial services that are focused on families, which is like, that's our advantage. We're the only ones like in financial services just focused on families. We had an opportunity to go horizontal and, just like the Fiserv, First Data, Global Payments of the world, and you get, one card product and it should be just the same as all the other card products. But I think there are immense opportunities in focused financial services on verticals, like people, and we hear about them all the time. Like, you guys should go into the film industry per diem. Like, there's a whole thing and there's all this cash and these paper checks are going around. Like, there's all these people who need meals and hotels paid by the film industry and the production companies. And then, like, you just hear about these new use cases every single day. That's the biggest one to me, like far and above kind of in the consumer world that we live in. That's a really big one.
So what I see more and more is the major platforms are realizing that they want to control the whole flow of commerce. They want people to search, they want people to purchase, they want to clear the transactions, and really sort of push others out of the flow of commerce. And so while in the past you could be a fintech player and maybe not have to spend a lot of time worried about some of the big platforms, I think that world is changing a lot nowadays. My co-founder, Lynn, and I were meeting with Facebook a couple years ago, and they said, which do you think is more valuable, the bank or the data in the bank? And so I do think it's as you get more insights to how people spend their money, which is a great representation of what they care for, you can serve them better and better and better. So I just think that, Gardner, when you started TTB 100 years ago, the fintech was kind of this little narrow discipline that people didn't know well. It's now very central to the way people go and build customer experiences through their channels.
Yeah, it's interesting you described it that way. I mean, when I look at the telecom industry, there was a time where if you picked up the phone and you got a dial tone, you were really excited and you're appreciative of the work that was being done to make that possible. And in payments, I think there was a time where merchants were excited that they could take a credit card and not have a receivable in collections and have to worry about the credit. But those, in banking, the same. I think after the financial crisis, people didn't really see as much value in the core banking services. And what we've been seeing is more and more people building these applications that people use. And Google has 7 products that have over 1 billion users. Yeah. So to me, the big risk is this banking as a service or payments as a service. It just starts getting embedded in some other application that you're interaction with for a broader set of reasons. Is what the biggest vulnerability is for a lot of the incumbents if they don't evolve in that same way. And one of the things I always like, Scott, about you guys is, you kind of push the banks into media a little bit. It wasn't like they would ever thought about being an advertiser. Like, in fact, when I go to your office, I don't really think I'm in a fintech office. I kind of feel like I'm in a cool, hip, advertising agency or something. Maybe speak to that. And then I've got a question from one of the attendees that I can ask.
Well, people often think of us as a fintech company, and we definitely have strong phonetics. We process more transaction data than Visa or MasterCard. We see well over 60% of all the purchases in the US. So we clearly have good fintech capability. But to your point, we sell advertising, right? Starbucks buys more advertising from us than they do from Google or Facebook. And they do it because we could do a better job of finding the next great set of Starbucks customers. And they do it because that we can also prove to the penny that for every $1 they give us, we give them $5 back. But we are an advertising company, but with strong fintech genetic roots. But I think more and more companies are becoming that way because they realize the power of the payments flowing through you and the insights of the how people spend money is just so valuable.
Yeah. One of the things that I've found interesting in some of our consumer fintech companies is their comfort and their ability to go outside of fintech. I mean, we've got one company that banks immigrants, but now they're offering telemedicine, and they'll be, that they can just get in a green light. Even I think there's, in the future you could see services for families beyond financial, right, Johnson?
That's right. Yeah, I mean, it's again, and we're in strategic planning mode for next year, and I had this conversation this morning with the team. It was like, well, but if we offer that, like, isn't that too different? Like, we are family finance and financial services. And I was like, no, time out. Start with the customer. Like Jeff Bezos taught us this, right? He said to his team, if you focus on your competitor, you're wasting time on the wrong thing. Focus on the customer. Competitor's never going to give you money. Customer's has all the money, is going to give you the money. And so I'm like, it doesn't matter what the category is. Like, if the families, like, we have these things that are testing really high that our families are asking for that might not be directly financial services. It might not be something that a bank would offer, but if it tests really high and like the customers want it, then I think we should be talking about it. There's a extreme version of this, which is the company Dave and the CEO Jason Barner. I don't know if you're an investor in Dave. Mm-hmm. He has like an extreme version. Yeah. So his is like, if a bank would never do it, then we will do it. Which I kind of like. That's kind of fun to say, but like a job board, and like they do things inside the product that's very different.
Yeah.
We're not that much. We're just like focused on the customer first.
So Hussein has posted a question for us. So what are the largest unaddressed pain points in the fintech industry? And then kind of a follow-up, which is best strategies for startups to quickly define product market fit. So we'll start with the unaddressed pain points, and I'll get you guys warmed up, but I could just tell Hussein straight up, if somebody's using cash or checks, that's low-hanging fruit for fintech still. And there's still an enormous amount of both.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like I said, those verticals, like find those verticals where there is a specific use case, a very narrow, segment. Now, the problem is those are going to get smaller and smaller as the market starts to find them all. And so you still want to be at the table that, you want to be in the right market. You want to be in the right spot at the right time, because I think too narrow and you're going to have too small of a problem, at least to do a venture funded business. We've seen a lot of them, and we've looked at, buying them when they run out of money and can't raise any more money. So I think finding those super narrow use cases. There's also a ton of opportunity. Like I mentioned, all the different partners that it takes to power Greenlight. There's a lot of pain in all those partners, like whether it's identity verification or fraud or customer service or just mobile app delivery or capabilities. Like there's tons of opportunity there. So yeah, not just on the consumer side, but in B2B in the fintech industry, I think there's a lot of opportunity as well.
Yeah, but to build on what Johnson said, I think it's less around pain points in fintech and more around pain points in solving specific vertical issues, right? And because it's really, what's the pain point that keeps fintech from serving some customer need is the way that I like to think about what those are. Now, that being said, if you look at the banking world, the majority of banks are still served by, frankly, kind of old school processors that haven't innovated in the past 3 or 4 decades. And I think you'll see a continued evolution of legacy payment processors, legacy core processors kind of get replaced by newer people operating in newer stacks, clearing transactions in a newer way, solving fraud and better problems. So I think we'll see a continued general just evolution of fintech.
It's funny you said that, Scott, because like there was a time where we had on a board, we just wrote down every product that Fiserv and FIS had. And that was how we were saying, look, these guys are milking legacy products. They're not going to cannibalize it. I think they've started to a little bit because they're waking up, but we're like, we could, you could just pick on each little, vertical product suite. Another thing that I would share on this is I got from my partner, Mark Johnson, who was, one of the early guys at CheckFree, co-founder at CheckFree. And, when they started CheckFree, it was just about automating recurring bill payments at health clubs. And so it's very, very narrow and very targeted. But the beauty of payments and any financial services product is just the ubiquity of it. So like if you can solve a problem for one particular vertical and do it well and demonstrate early on that customer, wants that product, you got product market fit, you do have a lot of runway for TAM expansion with payments and financial services, because every business on the planet has got financial services and payments in it. Johnson, maybe on the product market fit, I remember early days, it didn't take very long. I mean, it was just, you guys stuck out the product, and I know it did for 2.5 years, but after we invested, it went quick. I remember leaving one of the
meetings. It was a real thing.
A lot of these people are signing up, and I'm not sure we know, but they're definitely signing up. But how did all that happen? How did you guys initially figure out that what you'd built was something that parents really wanted?
Yeah. So before I answer that, I do want to give everybody a resource. The article on the previous question, the topic we were talking about, the article from Andreessen, a16z.com, called "Every Company Will Be a FinTech Company," is worth your read if you're interested in opportunities in fintech. They wrote, the first version of that was "Software is Eating the World" many years ago. The new one is every company will be a fintech company. Fantastic essay, I guess they call it. So product market fit for us came down to excruciating attention to detail in research and customer discovery. Honestly, it's that simple, but it's not simple. It was asking the right questions, and then listening to the answers and not leading the witness. Because the problem that we all have, I'm like the worst offender here, is like, we want positive feedback from people. So we're going to say, hey, Gardner, wouldn't it be great if like you have your kid, you got kids, right? Wouldn't it be great if you could give them a debit card and they would be set up for life? And, you're going to say all the right things to convince Gardner that this is the right thing, because that's what we naturally do as humans. But I think we did customer discovery right in that you just ask open-ended questions and you leave it open, right? So how do you give your kids money? Full stop. Are there any problems with that? Full stop. And you really have to listen to that, I think, to find the opportunity. For us, we just did that right. I mean, that was right. And we heard kids don't plan ahead. Parents can't plan when kids don't plan ahead. We heard a lot of pain around needing cash when parents don't have cash. So yeah, for us, it was like that. And then, by the way, testing was a big deal in the early days. It is a massive deal now. Probably if you're signing up for Greenlight today, you could have seen any one of 50 to 100 variations of the registration funnel, because A/B testing every single word, comma, color of the button, placement of the button, order of the screens, we're constantly testing. And we did even in the early days, like the landing pages we were testing on, what words resonate stronger. I think obsessing over the data when you're trying to find product market fit is really important, because you have to run the experiments the right way.
Yeah. What about with Cardlytics, Scott? I mean, y'all had a little bit different model where Greenlight's going straight to the consumer. You guys were actually a B2B2C. You were going to the bank, and then from the bank, then the bank had to position it to the consumer. Like, what was that journey?
Yeah, what's funny? When we started the company, we said there's kind of like 4 big questions we need to answer. Number 1, can we ever sign a bank? Number 2, can we actually build the technology and make it work because of some of the prior limitations that I talked about earlier? Number 3, would consumers actually use it? And then, by the way, if all those are true, would advertisers actually spend money in our advertising channel as opposed to social media or TV or whatever else? And virtually everybody we talked to in the early days said that we're not sure you can sign a bank. We're not sure you can build this. Consumers might like it, but oh my God, advertisers will buy this like crazy if you can actually make this work. Virtually everybody was wrong, Gardner. We signed our first bank pretty quick. We did figure out how to build it. Consumers used the service like crazy. Even though it had so many strengths with advertisers, getting an advertiser to initially spend money in us versus something else, and getting them to grow their budget from 1 million to 2 million to 4 million has by far been the hardest part of the journey. And it's not because what we do doesn't work really well for advertisers, but you're having to overcome momentum. You're having to overcome the way they run their business today. That's just takes time. Right. And that's the B2B part that you're mentioning. That's still where we put most of our effort today.
Yeah. So this question is from Steve, and then I have a question from Gary after that. But Steve says, what are your most desired hard and soft employee skills to scale your products and sustain process execution?
That is an MBA question if I've ever heard one. So
I mean, maybe talk about the cultures and like the talent. And I mean, in VC, we always say A players hire A+ players and B players hire C players. So I mean, it's obviously, maybe just talk about like the importance of people in the success of the organizations and what you look for.
Yeah, it's very true. The A players thing, we were just talking about that today, actually. For us, we look for really smart people, and we can find, it's pretty clear, like in conversation or resumes or however you decide who's smart. Like, we want really smart people. Interestingly, something we do not look for is tons of fintech experience or banking experience. Like, we really don't care industry or really company where people have been. It's not a big criteria for us. We want them to be very, very self-starting. Like, that's really important to us, that Scott, I'm sure, knows this better than I do, because we sure have not solved how to get big without getting big. Like, we hate that we feel like a big company sometimes. Tim and I, it drives us crazy. It's like, we're 400 people now. Some people would say that's big. Scott probably says that's nothing. But like, I I hate it. Like, there's a process for this. Like, what are you talking about? Like, go do it. And then Zoom culture, like COVID did not help. And then everybody thinks that everything happens in 30-minute blocks on calendars. It's like, no, there was a time where we just walked over in this virtual, which was our real office. You just walked over there and said, hey, can we do this right now? And you get 10 things done in the amount of time it would take 20 Zoom meetings across a month. So it's like self-starting, kind of like bias for action is a huge one for us. And then we have this kind of interesting that I answer this question a lot when people are coming to Greenlight and recruiting calls or interviews or whatever, but they say like, what's it like? And I like to say that we are we are in industry-wise, like macro-wise, we are in a fist fight or a knife fight or whatever you want to call it, a very competitive environment where we have copycats coming up all over the place, small ones, startups raising money to copy us, and big ones like Apple Cash or PayPal. You never know what the big guys are going to do. So it is a very intense environment, and we push ourselves really hard. Like, we push each other hard. If we think the goal is 100, we say, why can't we do 300? And 300 may sound impossible, but you know what? I'd rather miss the 300 goal and hit 200 than set the 100 goal and hit 50. So we push really, really, really hard, and it's really hard. It is hard to work at Greenlight, and like, we all know that, and we admit that. But we have a lot of fun while we're doing that. And I think that's the balance that we have that keeps us sane, that if we weren't kind of joking around to the level that we do, it would not be possible. You would lose your mind in the intensity that it is to work at Greenlight. So people ask, like, I've kind of been serial entrepreneur, and like my kids would ask, like, Dad, what's after Greenlight? I'm like, I don't think there is an after Greenlight, because there's never going to be an opportunity where we're doing this much good for the world, we're making this much money for all these investors, and we're having so much fun, all at the same time, and we love going to work every day. So that's how we look at it. It's a little bit hard. I know it's not an easy, like, a checkbox answer for anybody.
Just as a observer of both companies, I feel like in fact most of our very successful companies have really strong cultures. And Scott, I've always really admired Cardlytics culture as well. It's just it has a similar vibe. I mean, it work hard, play hard, but maybe speak to that a little bit.
When Lynn and I started the company, we actually had a real discussion about what type of people do we want to hire, how do we want to grow the company, and what we felt very early on, and still the same today, is we want to hire smart people that are natural athletes that want to win, and then we want to give them the resources they need and frankly get out of their way. And guess what? If they make a few mistakes along the way, who cares? We're not doctors. We're not killing anybody. We can go fix it. And I think by hiring those people and having a culture where people know they can move fast and push the limits, it's really what Johnson was saying too, is what creates these challenger companies that frankly the incumbents have a hard time keeping up with, just because of the speed at which we can move. Now, but there is one part about doing the startup thing that's hard, is the people you hire in your first couple of years when you're a small company and nobody's heard of you and you're not really sure if you'll run out of capital in 6 months, are different people that you need 10 years later. And I have seen that both of my days as a VC, but also at Cardlytics, that companies often can grow faster than people can. And so one of the hard parts about starting a company and growing a company is people that you were super close with in the early days when it was a team of just 20 people may not be the right ones when you're a company of 400 people or 700 people or 1,000. And so there is a certain amount of bringing people on, letting them go that occurs throughout the process of growing a company. That is just a bit of a hard thing to go live through as an entrepreneur, but it's necessary if you want to keep your company with sort of the best A players you can get at that point in your history.
Yeah, agree. We've seen that too. We had an investor tell us at Series B, I think, that you will outgrow some of your leaders every 14 to 18 months. And we thought, there's no way, like, these are our people, like, these are our guys, our gal, like, this is a family, like, we got this, we're smart, we're gonna figure it out together. That has been so true. And it has been more the rule than the exception, that 18 to 24 months is about where people start to break in certain roles. And a lot of those people, can stay in that role and you add another leader above, or there's a different role. They don't always all have to go, but we have been very surprised at that. Has been very, very true. Yeah.
So this is a question from Gary that kind of, we touched on this a little bit, but he talks about is, have you seen increased competition from incumbent banks, given they have recently increased their technology spend and are starting to wake up to top fintech and or to fintech? There's always a big conversation between buy versus build at these firms. Is there a world where incumbent banks, outbuild fintech? So, can banks with Jamie Dimon's $12 billion IT, this is me, not Gary, but can they, compete with the entrepreneurial companies? And my general answer is they can't, because all the things Scott and Johnson just said, that they just create these environments that are just very different than the cultures of working at the bank. But I have you guys.
I just would, challenge anybody to say, well, how do you think Square would spend $12 billion compared to Chase spending $12 billion? And how much of that is going to maintaining data centers and, not Chase specifically, that's hypothetical. I love Chase, they're a great partner for Greenlight. But just, the efficiency of that marketing spend, nowhere near. I do not ever have a concern of them outbuilding fintechs.
I want to name the bank. One of our big bank partners tried to build what we built, and they spent well over $100 million, a couple of years, and they realized at the end that, oh wow, you know what, we're actually not an nimble technology company. Oh, but guess what? We don't know how to run an advertising sales force, so we need to go to partner with somebody that's their business. So the way I think about, but banks will all the time try to think about build internally versus partner, and they don't like to partner because it creates compliance problems and creates data leakage problems. But I think the way you overcome that is you just build a much better solution faster, and you become laser focused in making them succeed. And at least my experience is they generally come to the right decision and do the best thing for them and their customers. I think when you get to the point where you don't, but when I think where people can get in trouble with banks, if you start to treat them not as a partner, but just as somebody you're making money from, that will set their antenna off, and that will make them try to go find another way not to work with you. But so they will always think about building internally. If you're faster and more nimbler and do it better, I think you can still have a really good position with the banks.
Well, this has been a great session, and I think we don't have any more questions from the audience, and I think that getting up close to the hour. So unless is there anything you guys would like to add? Closing comments? If not, just email me your addresses so we can send you some thank you gifts.
Gardner, this is a lot of fun, and I won't say that Greenlight is the only one in Atlanta hiring, but Greenlight is hiring. I'm sure Cardlytics is as well, but Greenlight is hiring, and Greenlight is hiring. Thank you.
And Johnson, do you think Gardner will invite us in another panel?
I don't think so. I think
you can do as many as you want. I really do appreciate it. All the chain jerking aside, I deserve some of it. I mean, I definitely deserve it from Scott, but not so much from Johnson. We've got $100 million in Greenlight. I mean, I don't know what else I can do.
You know what's better than $100 million?
In fact, Scott is an investor in Greenlight.
I'm proud one. Yeah.
So,
in words of what's his name?
I had to cut my teeth on it. Scott was early. That was like 15 years ago. I was like 35 years old. I'm just like. But obviously TTV and myself included are very proud of being affiliated with both you guys, and thanks for everything you're doing, and thanks for helping us here with our Goizueta entrepreneur community. Rob, you look like you're back on. I'll hand it back over to you.
Yeah, thanks very much. We appreciate it all. And Gardner, thanks for putting it together. It was a great discussion, I thought. And to the 50 or so folks that signed up and did not appear, I'm thinking of withholding the recording for a period of time so they pay the price. I thought it was great.
You can be like the ACC network and just not show games that you're trying to watch because they're local.
Exactly. Anyway, thanks very much. We appreciate it. And best of luck to everybody. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.